Diversify, 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 diversify. Take an improv class. Take a scene study class. Take a writing class. Take a basic Pro Tools course. Have another job until you're making enough money that you can leave it. And the other stuff will come. It will. It just might take a while.
Tune in as we give flowers to Black men and women making waves in the audio industry. I'm your host, Sidney Evans, and this is Beyond the Threshold. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Beyond the Threshold. I'm your host, Sidney Evans, an award-winning audio editor and producer. For those of you who don't know, on this show, I interview Black men and women working in the audio industry, highlighting the lessons and experience it takes to achieve success in the field. Of course, we have another amazingly talented and well-rounded guest on the pod for today. But before I introduce her and jump into the meat and potatoes, I just want to acknowledge the listeners and supporters, because I'm a good amount of episodes in as far as getting the ball rolling, and you can sometimes get caught up in just scheduling recordings and keeping in contact with people and managing your calendar and making sure all your equipment works and marketing the podcast. You're doing all these things that you kind of forget to acknowledge what's actually important, which is the pod itself and the support, whether you actually listen in to full-length episodes or you're just liking the clips and everything in between. So I appreciate everyone that has listened so far. These things take time to build and develop. We haven't gotten to thousands and millions of listeners yet, but we definitely are in the hundreds. And that's how you get to the thousands and the millions and beyond. So I just wanted to acknowledge and show my appreciation for that. As far as our guest today, like I said, she's immensely talented. She's the owner and director of Pepsqually VO and sound design, both here in the United States and overseas. She's an award-winning casting director, voiceover, performance director, and audio producer for cartoons, narrative podcasts, and advertising. She's also a production manager, dancer, and voiceover artist. Yeah, so without further ado, I'd like to introduce today's guest, also known as the polite perfectionist. Yes, I do my research. Paula Gammon Wilson, welcome to the show, Paula.
Hello. Thank you for that lovely intro. I appreciate it.
Thank you. So yeah, I already gave a big background. I just want to jump into things. So can you really just share a bit about your background, your interests early on, and what kind of was your first love, the thing that you decided to pursue, and what kind of set you on the path of doing the things that you're doing today?
So this was not the original plan, being a voiceover director. I've had a kind of peripatetic work life. I started out interested in backstage work, but I didn't really know what it was. So I went into performance first, and I was accepted to a performing and visual arts high school in Massachusetts called Walnut Hill. And I entered that school as a theater major with voice concentration, basically musical theater. And I was in the musical theater program for a year. And then I decided this is not quite what I want to do. And I'd been watching the design and production majors do their thing and thought that was really cool. So I used sort of the back half of my freshman year to build up my portfolio. And then I was accepted into the production program. And that's where I really sort of found myself. I really loved running shows. I worked as a scenic artist in Boston, in California, and New York. And I also stage managed. And I got my union card by the time I was 21. And I was working off Broadway, one show on Broadway. I worked all over. And I also danced. And the dance was not because I wanted to dance or have a dance career. It was because I really wanted to manage dance productions. I really liked working with dancers. So I took dance class to better understand how to speak with choreographers. And one of my dance teachers, my junior year of college, said, you should try auditioning for something from a non-managerial standpoint. Put the number on your chest, go see what that's like. So when I was home from college, I took a bus down to New York. I'm originally from Maine. I took a bus down to New York and auditioned for the Alvin Ailey School's professional division, because I basically opened a dance magazine and sort of like closed my eyes and put my finger on a page, and it was that audition. I was like, "Oh, that's big and anonymous. Great." So I went, I auditioned. They accepted 10 dancers that day, and I was the ninth name called. So I left college and went and danced professionally for about 5 years, and then went back and finished school, but changed my major.
Before you keep going, I'm curious because I kind of I don't know too many people who like live that life. But you kind of see it more like in like movies and TV shows, little glimpses of it here and there. So quick question, like what is that lifestyle actually like? Like there's one thing to like have a passion to work for, but I would assume that it's kind of a lifestyle, a hustle that may be different from others.
Yeah, my rule was I want to eat and pay my rent fairly on the regular. That was kind of my rule. So I would do a show as a stage manager. And while I was doing the show as a stage manager, I was also auditioning for stuff as a performer. And so I was always just going back and forth. So whatever came next, whether it was a contract as a production manager or a contract as a dancer, I would do that. And it sort of took me all over the world. It was kind of a mess, to be perfectly honest. My family didn't often know where I was. I lived in, like, between 2000 and 2008, I lived in 11 different apartments because I would leave on a contract and then come back and have to live somewhere else. So you do have to get really accustomed to uncertainty, and you have to decide whether whether it's cool to not know. It's the uncertainty thing. You actually just have to sort of kiss it up to whatever higher deity you pray to and hope it works out. And sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. I got stranded in Italy once because a show that I was in, they canceled it while I was on the airplane to work there, and then I didn't have enough money to come back. So I had to wait until my flight back, but I was just sleeping on a beach. So it's actually harder to live that way now than it was when I was doing it. I'm older, and I was doing this in the 90s when they had paid internships where you would go and you'd work for somebody for 4 months and your housing and your food were paid for, and then you work for free. Or your housing and your food were paid for and you got a stipend. Those were the best ones because you'd walk away with like $600 a month for those 4 months, but you'd actually walk away with that because your housing and food had been paid for and the rest of the time you'd just been working. So I learned a lot in those internships, and those aren't very common anymore. Now it's unpaid, but you do enough of those and then you get hired. And that was what happened to me. I did a bunch of those between the ages of 15 and 19, and then I was just working. I was just hired and hired and hired. So after I danced and went back to school, finished school, and then I moved to South Korea because I was offered a job directing musicals for an English as a second language musical theater pilot program where we used musical theater games to teach children. And I directed a bunch of productions there, and that led to work in Argentina and then Dubai. And then I came back to the US full-time in 2012, I think. And I needed a job, and I was looking for work, and there was this small dubbing house that needed an associate producer, basically a production manager for their shows. And I was hired pretty much on the spot because I had a lot of experience in working in different countries and with different languages, and I had production management experience, and like it was just a super easy fit. I was a little bit too experienced for there, so I actually left there to go back to work for a dance company after about 8 months. And one of the clients tracked me down a few months later and said, "Hey, after you left that business, things got a little bit weird. We really liked working with you. Can you find a studio?" And I said, I can try. And so I had 4 days to find a recording studio to work in. And I was directed to a wonderful man named Questar Welsh, who became my mentor and a really like a staunch supporter of my work. And they gave me one show. That was spring of 2014.
So is this your first like foray into like audio exclusively?
It was my first time working in audio exclusively. Yeah. Until then, it had always been audio for theater, and as part of my work as a production stage manager. But I'd not worked in audio exclusively. I'd done a lot of voiceover as a performer, but not as an audio producer myself, and or as a director. So
okay, so talk a little, touch a little bit on about your experience doing it as a performer, and then I guess what you were able to take from that and apply it to as a director, and like what were the, I guess, big differences from doing it from a theater perspective, and kind of your process for learning that particular industry or medium?
So, since I'd already been directing a lot of musicals and theater, working with actors wasn't particularly difficult. And I already had experience working as a voiceover performer. So I knew how to handle myself in the booth. I knew microphones. I knew basics of technical things. It was more logistics, how to estimate time, how to decide whether I was going to ensemble record or record individually. It was lots of things like that where I had to figure out how the dubbing and prelay, the not pause space worked. And that 8 months at the dubbing house was hugely informative in that way. So I was able to take what I'd learned there and then add my experience working with actors, both as a production manager and as a director, to how I interacted with the people who were working for me. And then how to speak concretely with engineers. I discovered it was quite a bit like talking to my production team when I was working on stage. And I was working backstage. I was like, oh, this is actually really applicable. So I kind of gained a reputation as being an actor's director. Like lots of Asians would say to me, are you working on such and such a project? Because we love it when you work with kids, because then the kids, A, get better, and B, aren't scared of voiceover after working with you, because I was just accustomed to working with a variety of ages, with how to pace a rehearsal process. And pacing a rehearsal process in theater is directly applicable to pacing a recording process in voiceover. So it was actually a lot less difficult transition than I expected it to be. It was more working with clients that I had to learn and how to estimate budgets in a way that I hadn't had to as a production manager for theater. So yeah, they gave me a show and that show went well. So they gave me another one and that show went well. So they gave me 2 more.
Is this all kids stuff?
It was all kids. It was kids, tweens, and then it started to be ads and then some adult stuff around 2016. And then I added podcasts to that around 2016 as well. And so by 2018, I'd been recording in Questar's studio. And by 2018, I was his only client. We had so much work that he couldn't actually accommodate anybody else. So I went from that one show with 7 actors and that rented studio space in Questar. So now I have 4 engineers in the 2 studios, US and Europe, and roughly 125 actors working for me at any one time, and 8 writers because we dub into 8 languages. So we're busy now. We're busier.
So your introduction was basically doing the dubbing is like doing the voiceover into a new language, basically,
yeah,
right?
Yeah. But we were going from Italian into English with that first show, and now I go both ways. So English into other languages or other languages into English. Yeah.
So yeah, okay. So that's interesting because when I think of voiceover, I just think of like commercials and I don't know, film or like ADR, which is like dubbing, but it's just in the same language or whatever. But so when you did that, like, did you think like, okay, I just want to kind of stay in this lane? So like the majority of what you do for your company, which we'll get into, and how you kind of briefly touched on it, but we'll get into more details. Is the majority of what you do still dubbing, like translation from different languages, or is just like a broad spectrum?
Dubbing was how I started, but the majority of my work is actually directing prelay. So I direct the audio before it goes to the animators, because the scripts are recorded before it goes out to the animators. So I'm hired to do that primarily for English. At any one time, I might be directing 4 different shows because I'm directing the not pause for everybody, and then it goes off. And then if the show does well, they will often bring it back to me to then localize it into other languages, because they know that I have a clear understanding of the show since I directed the original, and I can cast it and then direct it from within my roster of artists.
Okay, that's cool. So you technical wise, directing wise, you had that skill. And upon doing my research for you for this as well, so that you went to school for screenwriting too.
Yeah, that was when I went back to school after dancing. I went to school for liberal arts with a focus on screenwriting and third world cinema, because that was the part I didn't have a lot of experience in. So I wanted to make sure I had that.
What was that experience like? Because a lot of times, and I've done it, and I'm sure other people have done it too. Like, I guess audio purist, which I'm not going to necessarily call myself a purist. This is not something that I fell in love with when I was, 8 years old or do whatever. Like, I come from an athletic background, and I developed this passion later on in life. So I don't want to. I know there can be some debate between people who come from like the old music, using tape and doing things, and then now you're moving to the digital age, and there can be kind of these debates within the community of like who's been true to it, who's new, who's just trying to jump on the podcast bandwagon, and all this, the business side of it, and all these things in between. But I said all that to say that I think writing for people in audio, especially with the state of the industry we're in now, which if you can do multiple things, it would be advantageous for in regards to getting roles. So I think having that skill is very important. But what was your what was that experience like for you in school? And then like how did you translate that to what you were doing, whether it was the stage production theater thing or once you got into like doing audio exclusively?
So when I was doing the the degree in screenwriting, it was after my production management for theater career was sort of like beginning to twilight. I was really moving more into directing and for theater at that point. And I was actually considering, did I want to go to direct for film from there? I was actually like, do I want to do the writer director thing? I was really just trying to figure myself out because I knew I wasn't going to dance full time anymore. My body just couldn't take it anymore. I'd started dancing late, and then I'd had a really intense, crazy career, and then my body was like, and we're done. So I actually used my screenwriting more once I became a dubbing director and then a prelay director, because it's interesting. When you're working in the dubbing space, you're often helping to shape the cultural life of a show, because someone will do a translation of it, but culturally it won't always work. Like,
oh, so you're like, it's a word in English, but this is not how people talk.
Yeah, like not how people talk, or even how a situation is framed, or how a relationship would work in that socioeconomic background in a different country, So, I mean, it's even simple things like someone's animated a sequence about Christmas, but your show's in China, and like, we got to rework that. So it became, I ended up using my writing skills quite a lot to reframe scenes so that they would work culturally or emotionally. In the copywriting space for ads, first I actually would write copy for people when I was first directing. They would be like, can you just make something for us? And then as I got further along, was just serving as the director. Sometimes something just isn't landing when you're working with the artist and the producers and the ad team in the session, because ads, my gosh, directing for ads, there'd be like 18 people in that session and one poor actor being told to like put a little more on the they can be really painstaking. And sometimes I would just say, hey, can I make a creative suggestion? Just, you're welcome to ignore this, please, because you don't want to step on anybody's toes. And I would just be like, here's a suggestion. And about 85% of the time, my suggestion was taken because A, I knew what could be easily said, but B, I also had this experience as a working writer, as a copywriter. And copywriting actually was a great fallback when I was first starting the voiceover company, because I would do it in between my voiceover directing gigs, because they didn't come like all immediately. I had to, build up like any other career. But it really taught me how to work with copy in a way that I hadn't had to think about when I was a voiceover performer. So it was a really useful skill to have. I'm glad I did it.
Yeah, that's great and interesting, because so when I got into audio, the technical part of it was kind of the draw for me, as I would assume it would be for a lot of people. But like once you start trying to make a career and be business minded about things, like you kind of got to start delving into these other avenues. And I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like anybody doing media, like the writing thing obviously is a great skill to have. And I've like growing up and being from like my schooling and all that stuff, like I've always had teachers like, you're a good writer. Like I'm the type of person that I'm good with grammar, like I know how to structure sentences and
Mm-hmm.
things like that. I can write, but I'm not necessarily, and I don't know how to. I haven't perfected writing in a realistic way. That's like a conversation. I don't like. I feel like writing dialogue or things like that would be really hard for me. I feel like writing copy or something like that may be a little easier because it's kind of more of in between of like you got to try to relate to the person reading it, all, but also we got to satisfy like the person. Like you're basically selling your writing to sell something. So I feel like I could probably do that a little bit better. But there are like all these nuances within writing. And I actually really appreciate people who have like heavy writing backgrounds because like I said, like it's a great skill to have. So I'm glad you were able to kind of use all of your experience to kind of figure out the best ways to do things, but you had something to pull from as far as a writing background. Some people may be trying to start from scratch, where I feel like could be much more difficult. But I also want to jump back a little bit because obviously you have a lot of experience. You're coming to these spaces, a lot of experience from your theater background, and it looks like it wasn't too difficult of a task for you to get hired and make that transition. But at that time, or even now, like where did you see a lot of like black people in there? Like not most are in theater, but like just like the audio when we started doing the dubbing and voiceover things. Did you see a lot of black people in those spaces?
Um, Not really. uh, I I sort of actively hired brown and black performers, but that was largely because a lot of the people that I knew in the theater community in New York were brown and black performers because of coming from Ailey and having connections to the dance half of the world, and a lot of brown dancers. So brown dancers would invite me to their productions, which featured other brown performers. Um, it was mostly voiceover artists, but not directors, not producers. It wasn't until I actually started working in the narrative podcast space that I started meeting a lot of brown and black producers and directors, which I thought was really fascinating. In the commercial world, no. In the animation world, lots of performers, but not many producers or directors. And then I got to the podcast world and the narrative podcast world. It was everything all over the place. You never knew. It was great. I felt like I was in this interesting fraternity of people making theater and audio movies, and we were like all the misfit kids, and we were brown and black and yellow and orange, and like everyone was just kind of doing their own thing, and that was very, very, very cool. It was something that I really liked about the podcast space. That's still very, very true.
Well, I'm actually very appreciative. I'm glad you said that of the podcast space. We'll get more into that as well. But that has kind of opened up and diversified the audio industry tremendously. Depending on who you ask, that could be, in their eyes, that could be a great thing, or it could not be so great. But obviously, for people like you and me, we think it's a great thing. And I've worked with, a lot of my connections in podcasting are actually from black women producers. I just feel like they have figured out the formula. They're just amazing at doing that. And a lot of the early guests. Well, my first guest was a black woman producer, and the people that I have stayed in touch with have kind of fallen within that realm as well. So I guess it's kind of a natural transition. Can you talk about like just going from, I know you're getting a lot of work and you briefly touched on it, to forming Pepsqually and what that process was like, and kind of come to the realization like, okay, I want to do this as my own business and some of the challenges, and then also how you kind of got into the narrative podcast space. What were the first couple of things that you worked on that were presented to you to where you saw that this is like, okay, this is something that, an offering or something that I can continue to do with my business over time as podcasting becomes more sophisticated. It has that narrative element to it as well.
So the trigger for that was that I was handed a show and I needed to pay actors and pay the engineer. So it was not like, people are always like, how did you raise your first whatever, get your series A? And all, like, I didn't. I was handed a show and I had to make it, and I needed to form a business to do that. And then people gave me more shows, so I'm still here, So it wasn't actually any sort of big decision, or there wasn't any planning behind it. I was handed a show and I had 6 months to deliver it, and that was that. So it was one of those, when preparedness and opportunity meet, you get luck, like, so I had an opportunity. I was prepared except for this one thing, which is I needed a business. I started the business. There you go. And then I just kept making things under the banner of that business. So Pepsqually was not a massive plan or any sort of, the formation was simply because I was making shows and I had to be able to pay people.
That's a good place to be in, though, because a lot of times people start the business and then they like kind of got to start digging. To whereas you look at all alternative, you look at all the opportunities in front of you, and you're like, I have this responsibility, I have a lot of responsibilities, and I don't have a lot of time to do it like on my own, like, or I don't have the skill set for this particular thing. So you just start hiring people, and it evolves into a company, and that becomes a thing. So even though that's probably not the sexiest way is to come up with this idea, like you said, get funding, and you're basically doing everything but business, like making money, turning a profit. Those things kind of get lost. So I did want to acknowledge that. And just as a refresher, the second part of the question, or it's actually a whole different question. You're jumping into like narrative podcasting, and I don't know, just seeing, the evolution of it, it becoming kind of this thing that nobody really knew about maybe 15, 20 years ago, and now seeing what it has become.
So I was at Kidscreen in 2017, and actually the producer that first gave me a show said, "Hey, there's this company that's looking for someone to direct this audio drama thing. They should talk to you." And he introduced the two of us. And I was hired like 2 days later, I think. And it was this huge production. It was called Season Isle. It was about two kids in a fantasy world that basically each quadrant of the world is a season, and the two kids and their spirit tree like unite the different realms.
This is very eclectic.
Yeah, it was really cool. It was really cool. Yeah, it was very mad. The kids were great. The kids were wonderful, the two actors. And it was called Season Isle, and it was super fun, and we worked super hard on it, and just sort of had to figure it out because there was nobody making anything like that at the time, like kid-driven fantasy. Like there really wasn't anything for us to go on. This was 9 years ago, really, but 8 years ago, but it was very, that kind of like scope of show was kind of new in the space, and kudos to the team, because we were just making stuff up as we went along. It was very much like directing theater. I ensemble directed, so I had the whole cast together to record, which was great. Yeah, it was fun. It was really fun. And that show led to another show and another show and another show and another show, et cetera, and so forth. By the time I'd done like my third show with that team, a company had been launched. And that company was called Pinna, which was a podcast company for children's content. Big sweeping audio projects.
Is this so I'm gonna jump in there real quick, because usually I address this at the beginning of the episode, but it kind of slipped my mind. But so how I was connected with Paula was because of Torin, who I had on the show. So what did you all work on together?
Torin and I did word of the day, joke of the day, fact of the day. I feel like we did one other show together. We did multiple shows together. Torin's the man. We had a great time working together.
That's cool. I'll let you get back to it. But yeah, I wanted to make that connection point, because that's kind of what I had in mind with the show. Like, it's easy to just like, I'm just have people on and talk about their experience in audio, just have them be on their way. But to ask, I guess, like, is there anybody else in this space who you have worked with has been a great experience, or that you know of that think would be great for the show, to kind of bring everything back together. So, and that's how I like starting off. Obviously, I had to kind of outside of the network that I already have, and I didn't just want to stay in the podcast space. I wanted to address all the different realms of audio. So that was what I was relying on. The first guest that I had that maybe did music composition or scoring. Okay, I had them on. Who do you know in this space or around this space that I could have on next? That way I can have a diverse group of guests within audio. So I wanted to point that out, and I'm glad he was able to make that connection. I'm glad you were willing to, obviously it helps to when somebody connects you. It's a little bit easier. There's a point of reference. There's something that you have in common. But that's not to say that you still had to agree to come on the show. So I was just curious about what you all have worked on together. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was super fun working with him. So yeah, the narrative podcast space has grown a lot. I think some people don't understand what it is. Like you say podcast and they think talking heads, which is, basically what we're doing right now. But there's this whole other world of like true audio drama that they're basically movies without pictures, fully sound designed, fully scored, excellent actors in them. Lots of ancillary content for popular shows. Like there's a great X-Files podcast. There's a series called The Mistletoe Murders that Colby Smulders did that's now been turned into a TV show. Like there's some like really cool things in both the children's and adult audio space that should be heard because they're fun.
It is fun. So basic in reference to some of the stuff that I wrote in production that I've done. So I used to work for this company called Frequency Media, and one of the podcasts we did it was called Once Upon a Playtime. It was basically about about the development of children and how giving them space to play and express their creativity is good for their like development and things like that. So I worked on that. I think that's it is the only kids podcast or project production that I've worked on. I don't know, and it's just something about like the innocence of producing something that's like geared towards kids or their parents. And I worked in post-production, so a lot of the times like it would be a long process to make the show, but it's like I don't really get my hands on it and touch it until the end. Mm-hmm. So I was able to do that, and then like once we as a dialogue editor, and once the show was done, and it was just a feeling while I was working on it. I was just like, I feel like this is going to be really impactful. Like we worked on some great things, but it was just something about that kids content, doing the original music, I guess the music part of it is probably where you feel like the innocence comes in, with the different sounds selection that I think they decide to choose. But also in comparison, the company I worked for after Frequency was Tenderfoot TV, which is true crime podcast. So the two subjects or genres that you just mentioned, which it's a lot edgier. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's a way different dynamic than kids related content, and sometimes it could be heavy, sometimes it could be gruesome, and all these things in between. And even though I enjoyed it because of how edgy and I guess kind of cool it was, like it can kind of mentally I started to realize that it was like weighing on me as far as because of the subject matter. And you don't ever want to get desensitized to, the unfortunate things that happen to people or the people that are affected, like the families and people who are still living. So I just did want to point out that there's a contrast between doing those two types of content. But I guess the question for you is like, do you, before we move on to other things, as far as the children's content, like, I guess this is a refreshing in a sense to kind of work on that stuff. Because a lot of people in the world, like I always say like people who work in the medical field, like you're dealing with like real life, everyday stuff. If you're a police officer or you work, I don't know, sanitation department, like these are like things that you have to do to like continue to that are essential to the functioning of a society, but kind of what we do is kind of more from an entertainment storytelling standpoint. But even within that thing, you can do it within subject matters that are heavy or more light. So was it refreshing to you to work on kids content? Because it seems like you have a lot of experience in that.
Yeah. I mean, I think because I come from musical theater and then directly from musical theater for children, I'd written a series of textbooks. I taught my methodology with for the English as a second language sort of foundation. Briefly, my head was already in the kid space. Like the idea of educating children, speaking to children concretely was already there. So I gravitated towards that kind of work because it just felt fun for me. I didn't want to teach anymore, but I did want to be involved in the development of children. And so I actively sought that kind of work.
And how big of a market, like I would assume, like, because I know like social media accounts, like, you know, gears towards kids, like the development of their kids, like there's a huge audience surrounding these things. So outside of like that one project I worked on, I don't have any kids, so I don't live in that world of like things that are catered towards kids. But is there as big of an audience in that as what I feel like I've seen, or maybe it's just because I'm on the outside looking in? Like, is it a kind of a hot genre right now?
It's not a hot genre right now. Unfortunately, there's no genre that's particularly hot right now. The industry is, as a content machine, is struggling at the moment. But up until about 2021, yeah, children's content was actually king. That's where the most money is, or was, not anymore. The way you make money on a cartoon is not by the cartoon itself. Cartoons are basically just big money pits. They're really expensive to make. They take a long, long, long time. Take 1 million people. They make no money in and of themselves. The way they make money is when you merchandise them. So you want to license them to as many different places as possible, which is why localizing a cartoon is so important. And then you want to license the swag that goes with those cartoons in as many different places as possible. So cartoons are basically just hour long, half an hour long, 15-minute long, 6-minute long, 11-minute long commercials for toys. Right. And backpacks and coloring books and hats and whatever else. Cereal box. Yeah, exactly. It's whatever licensing deal you can make. That's how you make your money. And so cartoons and children's content of that type is monetizable in a way that a network show isn't. It's not so reliant on commercial ad spend. It's not so reliant on subscriptions, though those things all help. You want your show to get in front of as many eyes as possible so that you can sell as much stuff that's not the show as possible. Yeah. And so in that way, kids' content has been popular for a long, long time. Podcasts were interesting because there was nothing to see. So when children's podcasts began to explode, suddenly parents were like, oh, these are more educational kind of, because there's nothing, the kids aren't going to be sold anything. They aren't going to be advertised to in the way that visual cartoons do. But then podcasters working in the kid space had to figure out, well, how do we monetize then? Because there's no visual for them to tie themselves to. And then it became about, well, if you want to see the visuals, come to our show. If you want to see what the character looks like. And so they ended up creating visual representations of the podcast in order to make money. So, yeah, it's an odd world, the kids content world. It's really interesting too, the difference between North American kids content and everywhere else. Because I work in Europe and I work in the US, and the content in Europe is way more experimental, way more intellectually challenging. Sorry, my stomach is like growling a lot. Hopefully the microphone's not picking it up. And rock on. And in the US, it's a little more, especially the US, Canada, not so much, but in the US, it's a little more like spoon feed the kid. And it always surprises me when, even sometimes I'll direct the European version of a show and the American version of a show, and they're actually different scripts. for the same character, and the situations are different, and the character arcs are different, and it's really fascinating to me that there's like a way an American cartoon has to be, whereas in other places it's a little bit slower. Sometimes it's edited differently. It's really interesting.
I think before we go to the next topic, I think it's interesting because like I feel like in other places the kids content is more like I think it's actually more so about the development and the long-term result for the kid, to whereas here is more about money and all that other type of stuff that we just went into. So based on what you just said, that would make sense. But I also want to jump back a little bit to where you briefly mentioned in passing that it's from a content perspective, like things are kind of struggling here on all ends in all types of media, and you've been in it for a long time, so you've seen the peaks and valleys of it. But what would you like attribute to like the state of industry, of the media industry in general, which also encompasses what you do in audio and things that I do in audio as well?
Well, there are two things happening. One, during the pandemic, everyone discovered that animation was about the only thing you could make safely because everyone could work separately. So studios spent a ton of money making animated projects, and they somehow forgot or didn't get the memo, or just I haven't ever quite figured it out. They forgot that the only way you make money on animation is merchandising. So most of them didn't make any money back on all of this animated content that they churned out. and the end result was that some people went under, some companies went under, some companies laid off a bunch of people, some people merged and then laid off a bunch of people. They basically they just poured their money into churning out stuff that they couldn't figure out how to monetize. So now there's no money. So that precipitated or necessitated, a sort of immediate put on the brakes, holy crap, we don't have any money from pretty much everyone. And they also made so much that there was this glut of content kind of hanging out that no one knew what to do it's all just like a pile of wild mismanagement from the top. And then and then AI came along, and a lot of people went, oh, well, we can use this instead. And AI is such an interesting thing in that they want the skill without having to pay for it. So, so they basically like generatively borrow from everyone who has the skill, so they don't have to pay for the skill. Like AI should be making my life easier, not an executive's life easier, but it's gone the other way around, So now everyone's testing the waters of not using people, using our skills, but not us. Yeah. So I'm seeing that begin to affect dubbing, especially. I hate hearing it because someone who's not in the sound world doesn't hear it. They don't hear the difference. They actually don't. If you're in the sound world for any length of time, like my whole body does this as soon as an AI voice happens, even if the AI voice is good, because it's missing some key components of what makes a voice human. And so even if it sounds like a real person talking, it doesn't feel like a real person talking. So it's easier for me to sound like AI, just pretending to be AI than it is for AI to sound like me. Yeah. And so I can feel it's like nails on the chalkboard of my soul, like it's just like, oh, whoa. And sometimes I'll notice in a production when they'll switch to an autoed voice, either because they couldn't get the actor back or because they just needed some reacts or whatever. And it's just like, whoa.
Yeah. Maybe they're trying to trick you. It's like, we'll start them off with the feeling, and then we'll just slowly transition to the soulless voice, which we can always, people like you and me, we can always hear, like you said.
Yeah. So, but the average person isn't as savvy about that. And so I am aware that I might have to pivot in under 5 years, just because a portion of my work is going to disappear into the ether that is some upper level executive deciding they only want to spend 8 cents an hour instead of our real fees. So it's that combination of too much content without a plan, plus the golden ticket of not having to pay people for skill has meant that a lot of us in the kids space especially are suddenly without work. Like 2024 was my worst year since my first year of the company. My 10-year anniversary was my worst year. And it's just because so many of the projects that I've been working on for years ended just suddenly. And when I say suddenly, like cast is ready to go, an episode in the can, and then sorry, we're not going to make any more, kind of suddenly, just like yanked out. And then companies restructured, and then people merged, and then people like everyone got let go. And then I had this producer, and then another producer, and then another producer, and another producer, because people kept merging and switching roles. And like 2024 was just basically like doing this upstream because the industry was in such flux.
So, having said all that, but if someone is bitten by the audio bug, whether they're like 8 years old, whether they had another career and they want to transition into it, whether it's people like touring who interested in media and somebody's like, this voiceover thing, like I feel like you might be good at, and on all the in betweens, like if they actually do make a decision and say, okay, I want to pursue getting in this field, like what would you think would be the best practice for them to approach it? Or would you tell them like, don't go down this road, like kind of take a different route to where there's some overlap? I feel like there's a lot of different scenarios where you can kind of get your feet wet and explore and see if it's something that's not only you're interested in, but sustainable. I think seeing if it's sustainable is an important part now because of where we're at with things. What advice would you have people who may be interested in getting into audio?
Diversify, 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 diversify. So take an improv class, take a scene study class, take a writing class, take a basic mixing class, take a basic Pro Tools course. You can even find them online, like audition for stuff, find a studio near you and ask if you can sit in on sessions. Basically create an internship for yourself. Because that's what I got. I got 5 years of internships before I started working in the space. And so I was actually quite experienced by the time I started working. It's not like I was handed stuff because I wasn't good. I'd already proven that I was good. Since that system doesn't exist anymore, you have to actually make it for yourself. Have another job until you're making enough money that you can leave it. Do not just decide you're going to be a voiceover director or a voiceover artist or an engineer and then stop what you're doing and be like, I need a job. No, keep working at whatever.
There are none.
Yeah, keep working at whatever you're doing, because your first goal is to eat and pay your rent fairly on the regular, and the other stuff will come. It will. It just might take a while. I'm just shy of 50, and I started this career. This career pivot happened 10 years ago. You know what I mean? So you do have to give yourself enough of a safety net that you can 4-letter word and find out. You know what I mean? You gotta give yourself a little space to screw around a bit and figure out where your best fit is in the space. But that may require quite literally having a survival job for a while. And then it gets easier and then you can transition. So I wasn't doing voiceover fully until 2016, even though my company started in 2014. I was still copywriting, I was still stage managing, I was still performing sometimes. So 2016 was the first year that I really was able to shift to full-time directing. So give yourself the time to get to where you want and ask questions, listen. Oh, for pity's sake, listen. And listen to all the opinions, because not all of them are right, but you can sort of figure out what works for you. I was really lucky. I had 5 or 6 people who were really very kind and let me ask them questions and gave me guidance and were just like good people around me, so that as I made the transition, it was a much easier transition than some other people might have had. Look for the folks who are just kind and who aren't assholes, pardon my language, and are willing to answer your questions, because they're gold.
All great advice. One thing I would like to throw in there, for maybe those, maybe not who are beginning, but maybe it has some success in the industry within the last, I don't know, so 10 or so years, and maybe have come with, it's been a little bit of a struggle these last couple of years, which I can honestly say I fall into this category. But like some people are really talented, they have these skills, but they're constantly just like, I want a job, I want a contract, I want this, I want that. And I feel like this is a time for you to really, like, if the work isn't there, like, create something of your own. Like, that's why I started the podcast. Like, I got laid off and I was like, I need a creative outlet. I need to still be, I don't want to let the business side of this make me lose my zest and my passion for it. So I started this podcast. Yes, it's not the narrative, high level storytelling stuff that I was accustomed doing in the productions that I was working on, but it's allowed me to develop those other skills that you just mentioned. I'm learning how to write, bro. I did a trailer for this episode. I learned a lot within that process. It's helping me with staying organized, which is a key component of anything you're doing. Obviously, I already had the technical ability, but if somebody who's in audio and they were a writer and it was like, I want to start a podcast, then you start to learn a little more about the technical. No matter, I feel like there's only a benefit can come from it. Like, even if your podcast doesn't blow up and you don't get a deal or do this or do whatever, like, just professionally, you're more well-rounded than you were when you started off. Yeah. And if you want to do something more creative, who says you can't do that as well? Like, you don't maybe have to do this forever. Like, I'm doing this podcast now. I'm in the process of like concepting and writing my own like narrative podcast, which surrounded I'm not narrative, I'm sorry, documentary style podcast, because I come from a sports background and that's what I know. So if you want to write something, you want to create something, think about the things that you live. Like, I'm a diehard Duke fan. Sports was basically my life for the first 25 years of my life. So I'm not going to just set that to the side and try to do these things. I'm trying to combine them. So you have to be more creative and trying to navigate and have some success within doing this. So I appreciate you telling your story, sharing your stories, giving advice and your take on where we're at as far as audio and media in general. But we've learned a lot about you professionally, but I want to know a little bit about Paula Moore as a person and your taste. So this is the last segment of the show, which is always interesting just to see if I have some similarities as far as taste with guests, or if their taste is way outside and left field away from mine. So so the first question is, I've adapted a little bit because some people may not be able to hone in on one, but what is your favorite album of all time? If you have one that's just like, this is the one, share that. But if just like, I don't know, it's a couple, you can't decide, just share those. I'm interested to know.
Afro Celt Sound System. I think the album was called Release. Zap Mama. Which of the Zap Mama albums? It's the one with Rafiki. I can't remember the name of it. The Wake of the Wind by David Arkenstone. And Tears for Fears' Greatest Hits.
I'm gonna be honest, I'm not familiar with any of this. So what genre do these fall into? Give me like a brief education.
Oh God. Afro Celt Sound System is like a fusion band. It was a group of Celtic artists, from Ireland, and a group of artists from West Africa who got together and jammed. It was a really cool album. They were together for a while, and then like different people came in and out, and I think it's only one person now sort of jobbing folks in. But
so you said Celtic, like Celtic?
Yeah, like Irish music.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
I got you.
Yeah. Wake of the Wind, it was David Arkenstone is like a new age composer, but he also scores a lot of films, and he did this album that was actually basically he told a story with the songs, but there's no dialogue. He scored it like a movie, but each song is a part of the movie, and it came with a book. It was really cool. And then Tears for Fears is Tears for Fears. Like, Tears for Fears? You don't know Tears for Fears. We must be like super different ages. Tears for Fears was a super popular band in the 80s. Yeah, I'm not going to sing any of the songs that if I sang any that you would know who they are. But
okay.
Sort of like British new wave. And then
when we hop off, I'm gonna do a little research.
Although I don't actually think they're from they might be Scottish. I can't remember. And then the fourth album I named was, oh gosh, I'm blanking now. It was David Arkinson, American Sound System, Tears for Fears Greatest Hits, and Zap Mama she's Belgian and Zaire. I think she's from Zaire and Belgium. And it's kind of like funk, rap, pop stuff. I don't know how to describe Zap Mama.
Okay.
I can't
How do
remember.
How do you spell it?
Zap Mama. Yeah. Zap Mama. And the album that I love, Amazon. That album is freaking amazing. Yeah. So those are my favorites.
Okay. I'm gonna do my research on all of these. I'm gonna see if it checks out or not. But next, favorite music producer or producers?
I mean, I feel like these answers are kind of trite. Timberland and Phineas. I really like what Phineas is doing. Like, his choices are interesting.
Okay, I'm not familiar with Phineas, but I'll add that to my research list.
Do you listen to Billie Eilish?
No, I don't. Oh, is that no? Okay, I don't. But okay, I feel like okay, I'm a little more tapped into that world than the new world with the album. So some point of reference there. Okay, cool. Favorite film score? I know you kind of mentioned this in the first one, but is there a particular score from a particular movie or soundtrack?
Anything that Hans Zimmer does is gold. Ennio Morricone, the score from is it Name of the Rose? Or what is his super famous score? I can hum all of it to you, but I can't remember what movie it's from. He did that amazing score for, it's not the one for Schindler's List. It's the one for, and I'm totally pronouncing his name poorly, so apologies to everybody Italian. The Mission. It was the score for The Mission. His score for The Mission is like phenomenal.
You put me up on game today.
So Ennio Morricone and anything by Hans Zimmer. Pretty much anything by Hans Zimmer. Hans Zimmer did a score for a movie called The Power of One, and the movie wasn't massively popular, but my God, was that score amazing. The movie is gorgeous. But I listened to that score on freaking repeat. Like when I was younger, I was glued to that score. Yeah.
Okay, those are cool. I got tabs open for all these, so I'm not just talking. I'm really going.
I'm trying to make sure
diligence.
That I just want to make sure that I'm right that he did the score for Power of One. That it
I got it pulled up. It is music by Hans Zimmer. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Good. Yeah.
Okay. And last one, favorite TV theme song.
I'm flipping through them in my head. Like, what are ones that I remember? Good Times, because that was my childhood.
Good Times.
Reading Rainbow, the theme song for Reading Rainbow.
Ah, that's a good one.
God, I
haven't gotten that one yet.
Yeah, the theme song for Reading Rainbow is always amazing. And then showing the breadth of my viewing, the theme song for the original Silk Stockings series. I don't know if you're probably like 2 when Silk Stockings aired. So Silk Stockings was a series on USA back in the day, and they had the coolest, like, it was just a bass. It was like super cool. Yeah.
Yeah, USA, you taking me back. The only show I ever watched on USA was Wings. Remember the show Wings?
Yeah, Wings used to be on NBC, and then it got moved. Yeah. So the theme song for Silk Stockings was kind of awesome.
All right. Thank you for the diverse diversity in your answers. Hopefully some of it'll rub off on me. Yeah, you probably had the widest range of answers that I've had on the show so far. But yeah, I think that's pretty much it, Paula. Thank you so much. But before we do end, If people would like to connect with you, support what you're doing, check out some of the shows and things that you have worked on, all that type of stuff, where can they find you online?
You can go to Instagram at P-Dubs2020. You can also visit Pepsqually.com. If you're an actor and you have a reel and resume, you're welcome to submit on the Contact Us page. There's a place to submit for actors who want to be added to my roster. Please know that I get submissions pretty much all day long, every day. So it may be several months before you hear back from me. It's not because I don't like you. It's just because we're busy and I might not need you or be interested in hearing you yet. And then it does take a bit to get added to my roster more permanently. So just any actors out there hearing this, it's not that I don't love you. It's that it takes me a while to wade through everything because I have to do it in between projects. And I am on Facebook, Pepsqually VO and sound design. A lot of the sort of meta things I'm slowly moving away from. So just emailing me via the website is probably the easiest way to stay on my roster because the other things are slowly being phased out.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, sounds good. I appreciate it. It was a pleasure having you on, Paula. Thank you so much.
Thank you for the invitation. I appreciate it.
Yes, ma'am. And for those listening, thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you for joining us on today's episode. Please don't forget to subscribe to the show and leave us a review. If you'd like to work with me or connect, please go to soundbysid.com and schedule a call. There you can also check out the full list of productions I've worked on. If you'd like to connect on social media, my handle is soundbysid.com on Twitter and Instagram, and I'm Sidney Evans on LinkedIn. Don't forget to follow Beyond the Threshold on Instagram as well. I'll catch you on the next episode.